Alright, so we're going to start looking at cells now. When we start with the smallest thing and we build our way up into the bigger organisms. And so we're going to start with the very smallest unit of life, which is the cell. And we're going to look today at how cells are related, how they're similar, but we'll get into a little bit of how they're different, and tomorrow or the next day we'll go even further in depth on that. Alright. Alright, so we go all the way back in history. We're going to look at a little bit of where the cell came from and the pattern of how it was developed, how we, not developed, but how we came to know it. First person to ever kind of look at something smaller than, general life like we see it was Anton von Leeuwenhoek. He designed the first microscope, and if you notice this microscope, it's very primitive. It's not much. It's nothing like what we use today. He couldn't see very much, but could he see more than you could with just your eye? Yes, which led him to believe certain things and start to develop certain theories about things that are inside of us. There's something that makes us up. All right, but that little primitive microscope there, he didn't see a whole lot. All right. So then we go to Robert Hooke. And in 1665, so getting close to 500 years ago, he used a microscope that he developed, and it's a little bit different. We have a different kind of microscope here. It's starting to resemble something that we use today. Okay, and this is what he saw. He looked at a piece of tissue, which tissue he used was cork. All right, like you see on cork boards where you stick the pin in and it holds something to it. He took a little bitty sliver of that, looked at it, and he saw this. He saw all these little holes in here. That cork was not just one solid substance. It was made up of smaller things. All right. He called these smaller things cells. And the reason why is because back in the 1600s, you referred to cell as something small, enclosed, couldn't get much in there, because jail cells back then were like that. They had these little blocks of cells where people were put in there, and they had them stacked beside each other, and that's where the criminals were held. And so this kind of looked like that, and so that's why he named them cells. Going a little bit further with the next two guys, these guys are kind of where we see cells come from and the concept of cells today. Schleiden and Schwann. So here's Schleiden right here, here's Schwann over here. We're still talking about the 16, 17, 1800s, a long time ago. Did they have the technology we have today to see things? No. But they had better than it ever been up to this point. And so they could see a little bit more, and they came up with the cell theory. Cell theory still holds true today. We use it as our basis of cells. What that theory says is all organisms are composed of at least one cell or more. So that means every organism has at least one cell in it. If it's a living thing, it has at least one cell. Can we have single-celled organisms? Yes, we have a lot of them. Can we have organisms that have multiple cells? Yeah. Look in the mirror, you'll find one. Okay. Something we take for granted, he came up with the fact that the cell is the basic unit of organization. That the cell builds on itself to form organisms. All right? And that all these cells come from pre-existing cells, which means one cell comes from another. You can't just spontaneously have a cell, poof, there it is. It came from somewhere. Okay? So these three basic principles of the cell still hold true today. We use the same, we know this to be true. It's not really a theory anymore. We can see it now, but we call it the cell theory. Alright, so two different types of cells. We're going to start with eukaryotes and prokaryotes. Easy way to remember these, and I'll tell you in a minute once I go over both of them. Alright, so prokaryote. Prokaryote lacks a nucleus, so no nucleus. Alright, it does not have organelles. No organelles. And we're going to talk about what organelles are in our next set of notes. Alright, these are the oldest. A lot of them are single cells, one cell. We can have multicellular prokaryotes, but most of them are one cell. So when we look inside here, we don't see a whole lot. We don't see a nucleus. We see this DNA right here just floating around inside. We see a couple of other things in here, ribosomes floating around, but we don't see a whole bunch of organelles like we see in the eukaryotic cells. All right? So no nucleus, no organelles. Eukaryotes, on the other hand, have a lot of stuff inside them. They have a nucleus, all right? They have organelles, okay? So how I remember this, you do have these things, okay? We have both. So larger, more complex, yeah, when you're going to have all these organelles inside there, you're stuffing all these little guys inside of this cell. It's got to be bigger. All right? It's got to have more room to fit everything in there, especially this big nucleus. Okay? Each of these organelles, including that nucleus, has a specific function. It does a specific thing for the cell. We're going to get into all those functions in the next time we talk about, the next set of notes, when we talk about each individual different organism. Okay? So if we look at this one, we're going to ask, is this prokaryote or eukaryote? And we use our little acronym here. Pro, no nucleus, no organelles. You do have a nucleus, do have organelles. Well, guess what? There's a nucleus. There's organelles all over in here. This cell does have these things, which makes it a eukaryotic cell. Animal cells, eukaryotes. These are what you're made of. All right? You have eukaryotic cells inside you. So, pro or you? All right? We're looking for, once again, remember, pro, no, you do. What's this guy right here? It has a nucleus. Nucleus means it's eukaryote. It has all of these different types of organelles, which means it's a eukaryotic cell. Okay? Looking for those different structures in there to tell you whether it's pro or you. There we go. We got another one. Pro or you. Do I see a nucleus? No nucleus. Which means no pro. No nucleus, no organelles. Alright, this is a bacteria cell. Bacteria are prokaryotic, single-celled organisms. Very primitive. Oops, sorry about that. So comparing the two, we look at the size just first. Here's a prokaryotic cell, so this is a bacteria. We have a bacteria cell here. I'll just put BAC for the right. Bacteria cell. Notice the size. Micrometer is extremely small, but we're looking at 0.1 to 10 micrometer. Whereas a eukaryotic cell, this is an animal cell. So bacteria, animal. This one, 0.1 to 10 micrometers. 10 to 100 micrometers. Which means this cell is at least 10 times larger than this cell. Well, if we as animals are made of these types of cells, and there is trillions of them inside our body, if we can fit trillions of these, we can fit 10 times as many of these, at least 10 times, inside our body. How do we get sick so fast when we get bacteria inside us? Because they're so tiny and there's so many of them. Okay. All right, moving forward here. We'll look at what we call the endosymbiotic theory. All right, if you break this word down, endo means to enter or go in. All right, go in. Symbiotic means relationship. All right, so a relationship where something goes into something else. And what this simply says is that all organisms used to be, they started out as a prokaryotic cell. And that then we had these bacteria. Bacteria went into that cell, and they became mitochondria. Mitochondria, that's probably the one major one you remember, organelle you remember from middle school. Mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell, makes energy. All eukaryotic cells have a mitochondria, at least one. The endosymbiotic theory says that bacteria became the mitochondria. And the reason why is because they do the same things. They have the same functions. They kind of work similarly. Okay? That leaves us where we have animal cells, animal, fungus, certain protists that have that mitochondria, and that bacteria went into that cell, became a mitochondria, and now we have the cells that make us up. All right? The other side of that would be plant cells. Well, plants have mitochondria, so the plant cell had bacteria enter in, make them into these cells with mitochondria, but then did one thing further. More bacteria came into that cell, and they are photosynthetic bacteria. Plants do photosynthesis, so do some bacteria. So they came into that cell and turned into the chloroplast. All right. Now, this is a theory. What's that mean? It means it hasn't been proven. We can't go back in time and see if this actually happened. It's long since passed, millions of years ago. We can't go back in time and see if this really happened. It's a theory. There are some things that lend us to believe this could have happened because of how these organisms work, because of how these bacteria work. They have the same functions as mitochondria. The photosynthetic bacteria have the same functions as these chloroplasts. So it fits. Do we know that this really happened? No. That's why it's still a theory. If we knew without a doubt and we had the data, we had the numbers, it would become a law. Okay? It's not a law. Never going to be a law. All right? So we are going to stop the notes there today and pick up there next time. All right? We are going to look at the organelles next time and how each individual organelle works, what it does for the cell, and how that all goes together. All right. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. I'll try to answer them as quickly as I can. Or you can jump in on our conference in the mornings and ask your questions either way. I'd love to see y'all there if you want to join us in. All right. Till next time, have fun.